Hello, good evening, and welcome to this edition of the program. Tonight, we want to talk about the phenomenon. I'm sure that the story about a private jet landing in Iran and the ownership of that jet has formed part of your conversation today, as it was in the newspapers and over the weekend. Tonight, we will be talking about engineers and planners, but more importantly, we will be bringing you exclusively the man called Ibrahim Mahama. Ibrahim Mahama has finally spoken. He's spoken about business in Africa. He's spoken about opportunities that can turn Africa around. He's spoken about his company, Engineers and Planners. And Ibrahim Mahama has shared some of these thoughts with the Afrexim Bank at a forum that, by the kind courtesy of Rashid Ibrahim, our cameras were able to pick up some of the footage that we'll be sharing with you tonight. So tonight we're taking you to understand this young man, early 40s old Ibrahim Mahama, multi-billionaire businessman, happens to be one of the 19 siblings of President Mahama, was involved in the news this week for the landing of his company's plane in Iran for business purposes. Ibrahim Mahama has also been involved in the news and has been a focus of this program a few weeks ago when we discussed the famous issue of Merchant Bank. Mr. Mahama famously paid the debt that he owed Merchant Bank, $27 or so million, by the support of Afrexim Bank. We had said on this program that a facility from Afrexim Bank was to be dispersed and Merchant Bank will get their money. Afrexim Bank, after that, invited Mr. Mahama to share his thoughts with them in a management retreat where he discussed a few issues. Now, you have to sit back and see what he said and who else was on the panel. Just to tease your mind, here are some of the things that Ibrahim said.
Neighboring Guinea has a proven reserve of iron ore to the tune of 1 billion tons. 1 billion tons in translation is about $200 billion. You ask yourself, BHP Billiton is selling that mine. Glencore wants to buy. BTG Pactual wants to buy. Metal wants to buy. Why can't an African bank, 10 African banks, put their money together, invest in that mine for us to buy it and sell the ore rather to them than to give everything to them? You sell for 600 million, you've lost 200 billion. When our kids grow, what story are we going to tell them? You saw on the video, Africa has been shipped away by day. As we sit here, Africa is going, with our soil is going. Meanwhile, we have no trade whatsoever to say, you sit in Europe, we send the ore to you and you send us the money. That's where we need to sit down seriously and begin to ask ourselves, where did we go wrong? Where we got wrong is that we don't have access to capital. Africa has got rocks that we're throwing away as waste, which we could use that to reclaim land and build ports for ourselves. And that money stays in Africa. Africa is suffering because of capital flight. No money stays in there. The only money that stays in Africa is the cost of paying salary. The rest of it is going out.
So that's just a teaser. You'll be hearing the full panel discussion that was held by Exim Bank in a management retreat. The topic was to discuss how African businesses like Engineers and Planners can become great multinationals and conglomerates like those others from Europe, Latin America, and Asia have been. So you'll be seeing that panel discussion that was led by Hubert Dan. So later on after the break, I'll introduce Hubert Dan to you. But tell your friend to tell his friend, send WhatsApp. We are discussing and getting into the mind of Ibrahim Mahama, the controversial CEO of Engineers and Planners, who has spoken to Afrexim Bank. We have the footage and we'll get into his mind. He talked about politics, he talked about business, but essentially he was worried about the future of African businesses and he offered some solutions. After the break, we'll get into that. Welcome back to the show, and thank you very much for joining us tonight. We are also we're bringing you the playback of a conference that occurred on the platform of the Afrexim Bank. They were looking to talk to some of their key African partners They are key African giants. We are excited that one Ghanaian company, an indigenous Ghanaian company, Engineers and Planners, were selected as one of those companies by Afrexim to showcase what the bank has been doing across Africa. We know that in the controversial Engineers and Planners relationship with Merchant Bank, in which Ibrahim Mahama came up for a lot of controversy, eventually he paid Merchant Bank all the debts that was due them by the support of Afrexim. In showcasing Ibrahim Mahama and other African giants, Afrexim Bank put together this roundtable conference to find out from these entrepreneurs, successful entrepreneurs, what it is that can turn African businesses around. This is the footage that we'll be sharing with you tonight. But we also know that the government of Ghana, by its Minister of Information, Felix Owusu-Kwakye, speaking to Joy FM earlier today, denied President Mahama's connection with his brother's aircraft in terms of leasing it or using it. He said that the aircraft was purely a property of Engineers and Planners, and they had 2 years ago, when the aircraft was bought, explained the purpose of purchasing the aircraft for their business and also for rental purposes. They are a mining company, and they believe that at the stage of their business, they require the aircraft because they were working across Africa, across West Africa, in Mauritania, in Liberia, in Sierra Leone, and in Guinea. The controversial issue that came up from the Iranian spokesperson and a bit of New York Times was in relation to, one, the ownership of the aircraft and why it had apparently landed in Iran. Engineers and Planners have said that they had their officials, including Mr. Ibrahim Mahama, on the plane to do business. Government has denied President Mahama's connection with the plane. But of course, Ibrahim is up for a lot of controversy, being one of the 19 siblings of Mr. Mahama and being a multi-billion-dollar businessman. Ibrahim is usually with controversy. But people hardly hear Ibrahim and his thoughts, and that's what we want to bring to you tonight. The Chief Executive Officer of Engineers and Planners, one of the great indigenous Ghanaian companies, is speaking. He's speaking about business, he's speaking about politics, he's speaking about how Africa can get it right. And this will be the first time that we or any other person, and that's why we call it an exclusive, bringing you the thoughts of Mr. Mahama. The event was moderated by another Ghanaian, Mr. Hubert Danso. Hubert Danso is one of the great Ghanaians around the world that we're looking, hopefully, to have him work for Ghana very soon. Mr. Danso is the chief executive of the Africa Investor magazine. Africa Investor is the foremost African magazine that profiles African businesses and raises money for them and creates investment opportunities for them. Hubert also goes around the world to moderate some of these top international functions across the world. Hubert Danso was the moderator for this one. This event took place in Dubai a few weeks ago. Here it is.
Before we do, if I can ask my colleague who's controlling the audio-visual to show us a very striking and visual interpretation of an African business leader, one who's on my panel here today, Mr. Ibrahim Mahama from Engineers and Planners out of Ghana. If we could just watch this video very quickly, please.
The story of Engineers and Planners started as far back as 1997 when a young man conceived the idea of setting up a heavy-duty equipment rental company. Today, the company has grown in leaps and bounds with an asset base of more than $100 million US.
The growth by leaps and bounds is because he works hard, he and the team. I think that sense of hard work and the competitive spirit.
Our services portfolio include mining, drill and blast, load and haul, rehandling of ore, tailings dam construction, leach pad construction, civil and earthworks, dewatering, exploration and grade control.
As you can see, we are standing at our Impoho site that belongs to GSI. We have Takwa site that is for Goldfields Ghana Limited, and Damai site which is also belongs to Goldfields Ghana Limited. And outside the country we have Yakepa, which belongs to ArcelorMittal, that is in Liberia.
In Impoho, in the western region of Ghana, we are executing a mining contract for Golden Star Resources on their satellite concessions located within the Hunibutre-Benso enclave. Since April 2011, work has been progressing steadily on a new pit called Father Brown. The Takwa Mines is owned by South African mining giant Goldfields. Our fleet include articulated dump trucks, ADTs, rigid-bodied dump trucks, popularly called 777s, Liebherr and Hitachi excavators, bulldozers, graders, and other heavy-duty equipment. These are operated by trained local Ghanaians.
Yeah, well, in the fleet currently now we're running at least about 20 777s. We have on order another 20 coming for several other projects that we're looking at. The 777 is a unique truck where it actually cuts between mining and civils. So we, being a mining and civils construction company, we would sit with the 777. Now, if we, depending on the model of the mine and the volumes being moved, we likely would increase to 785s in the future. But for now, currently, we're running at least 20 777s. A 777 today is selling for $2.5 million. That's what a 777 costs today. But it has to be matched with, let's say, Libre 984, which also is close to about $3 million. Yeah. We've invested in ADTs to the tune of about 70 pieces. One of them cost about $600,000 purchase.
Some 287 kilometers north of the Liberian capital and close to the Guinean border lays the Yekepa iron mine. This concession belongs to ArcelorMittal, one of the world's leading producers of steel. Ghanaian mining contractor Engineers and Planners is the contractor mining this concession for ArcelorMittal. The project started in May 2011. This contract involves mining, drill and blast, load and haul, operating the crushing plant, loading of rail wagons with ore for shipment to Europe. There are 2 locomotives that drive the 140 wagons. Each locomotive drives 70 wagons. One loads the ore in the morning and the other in the evening. The loading of the wagons takes place after the materials have gone through the process of being crushed into finer powder by the crushing plant. This plant is wholly manned by engineers and planners with support services from the manufacturers. A number of Ghanaian expatriates and Liberian nationals are engaged to help execute the contract. Heavy-duty equipment needed for the job were procured immediately the contract was awarded. Some of these included road trucks, dump trucks, dozers, and other light vehicles. They were transported by road from Accra to Yekepa. Part of the contract requirement is the transfer of knowledge and technology to the Liberian nationals through training and mentoring. So, with the complement of the core staff comprising Ghanaians and Liberians, work in an existing but abandoned pit started vigorously. In the course of the period between 2011 and 2012, another pit called Area B was opened, with mining actively taking place simultaneously in both pits. Work has been progressing steadily. Safety in an industry such as mining is very critical to the sustainability of the business. Our safety mantra, where safety ends, accident begins, has been very dear to our hearts. Since January 2012 to June 2012, our key performance indices in the area of safety has been great after working for 1,027,554 man-hours. The statistics read: lost time injuries have been January 0, February 0, March 0, April 0, May 0, and June 0. Medically treated injuries: January 0, February 0, March 0, April 0, May 1, and June 2.
Well, seeing is believing. Congratulations, Ibrahim. And in the name of the session, which is about inspiring everyone in this room and helping us come up with some very practical suggestions, I think that was very appropriate. As you all know, my name is Hubert Danso. I'm the CEO of Africa Investor. I'm going to be moderating a conversation today with some very esteemed and elite business leaders, development finance executives, and we're really going to try to give some perspective and have an interaction with all of you, the management and the guests, on this big question about moving and changing the narrative about business in Africa, about the African private sector. Over 10 years ago, we've been looking at the private sector, and it's always been very small enterprises. Now we're beginning to see that there's a larger opportunity with regional economic integration to build pan-continental and pan-African multinational operators. And we feel that a bank like Afrexim is supremely well placed to fund the trade, to leverage and facilitate the relationships, to make more videos like this available to each of us. Now, as I said, I've got a really great panel here, but I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves with a specific guideline. I'm going to give you each 30 seconds to introduce yourselves. 30 seconds. Okay. And within that 30 seconds, I'd like you, first of all, just to introduce your company and what it does, and also to tell us how you plan to triple your turnover, or what would you need to do to triple the turnover of your business in the next 10 years. We'll start with you, Mamadou. You can talk balance sheet.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot. My name is Mohamedou Niang. I'm the newly appointed Director of Private Sector Department in the African Development Bank. As most of you would know, we are mainly a project finance boutique, and we also a fairly large LPs in terms of accompanying private equity investment. We are present in about 40 private equity funds. Yes, I would, to the extent possible, very much love to triple and quadruple our business. We do about $2 billion a year at the moment. And for that, what I need is good businesses, both from a commercial point of view and from a development impact point of view, and I'll have a chance to discuss that in more detail later. Thanks.
Merci. Bon, vous avez entendu l'anglais depuis ce matin. Donc, vous allez entendre un peu de français quand même. Ok, je m'appelle M. Kwaou Niamoutier. Je suis le président du groupe Côte d'Ivoire Logistique en Côte d'Ivoire. Notre rôle essentiel sont donc de contrôler l'importation des véhicules neufs et d'occasion rentrant en Côte d'Ivoire pour le compte de l'État de Côte d'Ivoire.
Thank you very much. Ibrahim, I think he's had his introduction, but now we're going to hear about how you're going to triple or even quadruple your turnover in the next 10 years.
My name is Ibrahim Mahama. I come from Ghana. I started a small construction company called Engineers and Planners, and I've gone across to our neighboring countries to be able to grow the business. And I'd like to thank Afrexim Bank for sowing the seed in the company, and we're going to grow the company bigger than it is now.
Fantastic.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Craig Fitzgerald. I'm the Chief Executive Officer for Econet Wireless Global. We are an African-based telecommunications company. I'd firstly like to thank Afrexim Bank for this opportunity to attend this function. We've had a fruitful and long history with the bank. I think in a number of ways we are like-minded in terms of the way that we view opportunities on this continent, and we very much appreciate the ongoing relationship and the strategic partnership that we've had. I think the simple answer to your question, Hubert, in terms of how do we increase and triple our turnover, is through acquisition activity. That said, in our industry, there aren't a lot of obvious acquisition opportunities available, so therefore what we spend our time doing is looking at the mobile network operator and saying, what is it that the network operator has that is valuable? And what we see is valuable for the network operator is his historical investment in his infrastructure. He's got geographical coverage, he's got distribution, he's got a customer base, and he has a billing mechanism. He has an ability to charge that customer for certain products and services. So where we see the opportunities going forward is in the development of new technologies that we need to layer on top of the historical infrastructure that we have in order to begin to provide our customer base with value adds, with far more pervasive products and services, be they financial services, be they insurance, medical aids, or whether it be local content delivery in the form of media, etc., etc. And really that's where we see ourselves spending most of our time to achieve that objective.
Fantastic. I think one of the staggering... Why not? The issue really comes back to how do you empower. John Louis and myself, we were just at an event alongside the EU heads of state meeting that's taking place now in Brussels. And we were in a session, and in that session it was made very clear you do not support, it's not a good investment to support African developers or small companies because they're too risky. But we had a lot of European companies, for example, in the room who were receiving DFI support for their cash flow management as opposed to their project. So we need to find ways through institutions like Afrexim to look at things in a slightly different way. For example, when you talk about a project developer in Africa, the solution is suddenly to, okay, the project's not bankable, we will create a technical assistance facility to prepare projects. It is not empowering the company or the developer or the business owner, it's empowering the transaction advisors that are flown in and flown out, and there's probably not as much knowledge that's going across. So if you look at a lot of the companies operating on the continent, their challenge is, this project could take me 3 years. How am I going to pay and invest in staying afloat to be able to develop that project as a company, independent of all of the other technical things that you actually need? So I'm hoping now, Ibrahim, I mean, you've done it, right? So just share some views about how you think an institution like Afrexim or you know, with its ecosystem and network can really empower multi-national companies to emerge and operate, but focusing on the empowerment point. And I know that, for example, you've done this in across ECOWAS, you've got some ideas. Please share them with us.
Okay. Thank you very much, Eben. Yeah, I think Africa has come a long way. We have learned the hard way, and in the hard way, learning on the job has given us a lot of wisdom. I'll give you a brief from mining to other sectors. In mining, I came back from the UK in 1997 and started Engineers and Planners. I started like a small rental company, as the video said. I had one equipment I bought from a Scottish company who gave me credit for 36 months to pay. So I rented equipment on a project. I charged per the acre and got paid and paid the equipment monthly. In 18 months, I finished paying for the equipment. Before 18 months, I got another job to excavate a trench for them to put a bridge. I had no experience in that. I found professionals to advise me. We split the profit on the job, and I learned from there. We went into the mine. We noticed that I did a study to see in mining, if you do finish mining, you have to reclaim land. So I went and learned something about land reclamation, where you bring in the topsoil, you reed grass, and that was it. Then I got wiser and stayed in the mines for 3 years. Focused on the did for mining, drilling, blasting. I learned all that in that session, and I became a contractor. Now, what that meant was that in Africa, you went on a job, and on that job, you noticed that everybody there was African. The supervisors were just foreign. So you ask yourself, why can't the African do it? In there, I went, spoke to my bank. EcoBank was my bank then. They had that faith in me, bought equipment for me. But I grew faster than they could handle me. So I had to shift from bank to bank, and ended up going to Stanbic Bank, work with them. Then I got stuck where I got a job that was about $60 million, and my capital on the job was about 27 million. couldn't put it together. And unfortunately for me as a local boy, each time I was given a job, I had to find the finance. I had to mobilize in 2 weeks. So that became a constraint, but we weathered the storm. We went through, and we did quite a few big jobs. Then we got introduced by Afrexim Bank. Afrexim Bank saw our profile and what we were doing and was impressed. Although I'd criticize you a bit that it took 7 years. If I hadn't had the muscle to stand, I would have been dead by now. But with perseverance, we stood the test and proved ourselves. One of it was that we needed to ensure that we could do it. But in putting that projects together, we got the right local boys to be able to fill positions to keep the company going. We went past that. Now, coming back to Hubert, your real question is that Africa, the challenges are many, but the returns are much greater. If you look into Africa today and see the opportunities we do have, a clear example is Ghana. We've had a cement company in Ghana for 50 years, and they've held monopoly, and no local Ghanaian has been able to start it. We only had Dangote come in there to tell us that it was possible. He came and he did it. After Dangote did it, I said to myself, no, I'm also going to do it, and I've started it, and I'm doing it. From there, you ask yourself, for 50 years, we sat down and imported cement. So all our houses within that 50 years was all imported. We could never, ever start a cement plant in Ghana. Fine, you could forgive us because we don't even have the power. Now, but even having the locals to be able to participate in such a business has been hell. We don't have the likes of Afrexim Bank in Ghana. Apart from me knowing today about Afrexim Bank, I think I've given Afrexim Bank the advertisement in Ghana for the past 3 years, telling everybody Afrexim Bank was going to finance me, and then it came. Now, what I would say is, if we're looking to build African champions, we need to move on the ground and see what and where the financing is being really needed. Now, you sit back and our politicians will tell us that we can't give you that project because you can't raise the finance. And sometimes when you look at that project only costs $200 million. But if it's been given out to a foreign company, it would cost the country $1 billion. So what I ask myself is, you've got the stones, and an example of it is where we're sitting today in Dubai. All this land is being reclaimed, and the land being reclaimed here is being used, we reclaim it by using sand. Africa has got rocks that we're throwing away as waste, which we could use that to reclaim land and build ports for ourselves. And that money stays in Africa. Africa is suffering because of capital flight. No money stays in there. The only money that stays in Africa is the cost of paying salary. The rest of it is going out. If we don't begin to sit together, just pushing paper around, excuse me to take a swipe at Jean-Louis Ekra, you come back home retired and you notice that most of the projects that you could have financed have been taken over by foreigners. You ask yourself, we've got a clear example. Hubert, please give me at least 2 minutes to finish this. A clear example of it is something that saddened me. I got a contract to mine iron ore by a company called ArcelorMittal. They gave me a 30-month contract to do. We went in there, in 18 months, we finished our contract, and we said, listen, we're done. Are you going to write a big contract? They said, no, they wanted to do it themselves. So we handed the contract over within the 30th month. When we did that, we asked ourselves, neighboring Guinea has a proven reserve of iron ore to the tune of 1 billion tons. 1 billion tons in translation is about $200 billion. You ask yourself, BHP Billiton is selling that mine. Glencore wants to buy. BTG Pactual wants to buy. Mittal wants to buy. Why can't an African bank 10 African banks put their money together, invest in that mine, for us to buy it and sell the oil rather to them than to give everything to them. You sell for 600 million, you've lost 200 billion. When our kids go, what story are we going to tell them? You saw on the video, Africa has been shipped away by day. As we sit here, Africa is going, with our soil is going. Meanwhile, we have no trade whatsoever to say, you sit in Europe, we send the oil to you and you send us the money. That's where we need to sit down seriously and begin to ask ourselves, where did we go wrong? Where we got wrong is that we don't have access to capital. Thank you.
Thank you, Ibrahim. I mean, there are two key points there. I think, one, we've got to look at the capital in the continent and the extent to which we trust each other to lend and support our own businesses. And I think that's going to be a very fundamental. I'm going to come back to you. I know. Yeah.
Let me answer that question before we go.
Okay. Just that one.
Yeah,
it's not getting hard.
Hubert, I think the trust between Africans is here. We shouldn't fool ourselves that, looking at a project and financing a project is no rocket science. The project is there, you fund the project, all the oil is goes to a company, you the bank receive the receivables, and that's it. It's pretty straightforward. I don't see it when people see deals are that complicated that it can't be done. Thank you.
Spoken like a true entrepreneur.
Yeah.
But the reality is this, intra-African trade is anywhere between 12 and 15%, that we know. However, intra-African investment is at a staggeringly low 5%. Only 5% of the total FDI stock that comes into the continent is actually from one African country or one African company on a cross-border basis. Yes, there is the upside that its compound growth rate is projected over the next 10 years to be between 25 and 35%. But if you look at, for example, the OECD figures, it's always good to make some form of comparison. It's not like for like, but if you look at the OECD figures on Europe, intra-European investment is at 82%. We're at 5%. We place a great deal of emphasis on intra-African trade at 12%, but we've got a much more fundamental block there, because as the WTO used to say, you invest to trade and you trade to invest. So I really want to get some views from you, Craig, on what are the key sectors for intra-African investment, and what are the policy constraints that sort of relate to intra-African investment? What needs to happen to unblock the challenge so that we can go from a 5% intra-African investment level to clear double digits, high double digits over a sustained period of time?
Well, what we've always looked to do ourselves from an investment perspective is invest where the need is the highest. What we've seen in the markets in which we operate is that the industries which are clearly lacking from an investment perspective, in our view, are communications, transport, power and water. Now clearly there are a number of others, but from our perspective those are the four that we see a significant need from an investment perspective in. Now not only do those industries promote intra-African investment opportunities and intra-African trade themselves, but at the same time the industries themselves do create opportunities for local entrepreneurs to invest. And just to explain that in a bit, because if one looks at the projects, the type of projects that fall into those industries, they can generally be very large, very capital intensive infrastructure opportunities, and that might not in itself create the opportunity for the entrepreneur. But there are a number of feeder industries and feeder businesses around those large industries which in themselves create the opportunity. I mean, I think Ibrahim's example is a case in point. Certainly in our industry, from a telecommunications perspective, if one looks at the provision of civil works, for example, the construction of civil works, laying concrete, building towers, laying fiber in the ground, etc., maintaining infrastructure once it's actually once it's been constructed, we believe that those are opportunities that local entrepreneurs can actually look to develop their own skills in. Africa, as we all know, is a very challenging environment, and once one has developed the skills that allow them to operate a particular service in a particularly challenging environment, it's a very difficult skill set that a foreigner has a greater degree of difficulty replicating, because one then understands the unique set of challenges that exist in a particular environment in order for you to be able to provide a service, a successful service. We've seen examples of that within our own group. We started laying fiber optic cable, for example, in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe, as most of you know, is a landlocked country, doesn't have access to the undersea fiber cable. So how do we bring that capacity into a landlocked country? The answer was, well, let's try and build it ourselves. We built it. We understood the challenges that are involved in building in African countries. We've now extended that fiber optic cable to through the borders of Zimbabwe to Zambia, to Botswana, to DRC, and we now have 18,000 kilometers of contiguous fiber throughout the African continent. We have another product which is a mobile financial services product, transferring value and money from one subscriber to another. Now, what that allows us to do is look for an opportunity where we can do something that we believe that we can do well, and to export that opportunity to a neighboring country. And it might be to a network that we don't own or control, and in a country that we don't operate a telecommunications service in. But because we've been able to master a particular, the provision of a particular service in one country, it allows us to take that product and service into another country. And I think, again, Ibrahim, that strikes me as something that you've done particularly well. You've been able to operate and provide a service in a particularly challenging environment, and that's allowed you to look at springboard other environments in neighboring countries. In terms of the challenges and the potential barriers that may exist, again, we were just talking from our perspective, from a telco environment. We face a number. We face licensing requirements. We sometimes face ownership restrictions. We face import duties and various different taxes and tariffs, etc. And I think just in that, potentially with the partnerships that Afrexim have, with the stakeholders that they have, and with the mandate that they are looking for to create these opportunities, potentially what one needs to do is to isolate certain industries that one wants to target and promote, and look at potentially working with governments and policyholders to create short-term incentives or changes to existing policy in order to create local investment and to promote local trade opportunities.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Import substitution, adding value, beneficiation is the absolute priority issue. We, in the continent, just on 6 or 7 types of trade, we basically, on an import substitution basis, we lose $30 billion each year, which is more than the aid that the entire continent receives. That's just by sending our goods out and then paying for those exact same goods that have been enhanced somewhat. So I'm going to come to you, Ibrahim, but I'm going to come to you, not like this second, I'm going to come to you because I'm going to ask everyone on this panel now, this is too rich an opportunity not to have you business leaders, development finance leaders, to give Afrexim some very specific takeaways, some takeaways that they can actually try to develop some kind of product, some kind of instrument that can basically begin to address some of these issues that you're raising. And I'm going to start with you, Mohamedou, on this. Please, each of you, just 2 headline products that you think, or scenarios that you think that Afrexim can champion. Please, no broad statements, straight to the point, products they can take away.
Okay. All right, now, thank you very much. I mean, first of all, as African Development Bank, obviously, and I think we are on the same boat as Afrexim Bank in this regard, is that we cannot really cover everything. The products that we propose are not fit for everybody. In particular, in our case, we're not very geared to doing small transactions. But we acknowledge our limitations. So what we do is that every time we do identify a major bottleneck, we try to partner with other institutions to resolve that issues. I mean, we, as you know, we were one of the founding institutions of Afrexim Bank because we found that there was a bottleneck in the in trade finance. So you know, we've set up a guarantee company, Africa Guarantee Fund, to try and unlock some of the issues that we have been talking about access to finance to small entrepreneurs, etc. But specific to your question about two things that I would suggest is that this morning we talked about our growers schemes and how they can be applied. We're now currently talking about South-South investment. At the moment, as we speak, I will not be doing public fundraising, but we are actively working with a Ivorian company doing a large transaction in Liberia, so cross-border investment, with a fairly significant outgrower scheme that we've actually been able to convince them to include in the transaction, and we are helping them. So I'm inviting Afrexim Bank to join us in that transaction. We are currently fundraising, so that's very specific. And I think you will learn from the experience quite a bit, and it will help you, in my view, expand this particular experience beyond Cote d'Ivoire and Liberia, which are the two countries in question. The second thing is that in terms of transformation, you know, we look at our investment with the premise that the main, you know, people don't, you know, we don't eat gross, as I say. So we look at it and say, you know, a few years from now, 2050 is not that far away. It's only about 34 years from now. So we will be 2 billion. So we really need to create investments that create jobs, basically. And so one of the things, one of our policies in ADB is that we do not finance export of raw material. That's just as simple as that. Any commodity-based funding that doesn't have a transformation aspect, a local beneficiation aspects, we do not finance. And we forfeited some very good transactions. And what that does is that more and more we see companies come to us with industrial projects rather than, in the example of mining, just, you know, direct ore shipping, for instance. You know, one other example is that, you know, why should we finance export of cocoa beans to Europe? Those kind of things. So my invitation and the practical proposal is that you don't have to make the commitment now, but if, you know, Afrexim Bank could make the commitment alongside others not to be involved in financing of exports of raw materials, that would be a very good step forward.
Well, I think I want to stress on a point that my brother Mahmoudou has, from the ADB, has actually said. They don't finance export products, but you know, we need to rethink a lot of our business banking, what do you call it, proposals to the private sector. In Liberia is sitting on just 34 megawatts of power, the whole country, and doesn't have any transmission lines. If you had to finance anybody from Liberia who had 1 million tons of cocoa, he couldn't put that plant in Liberia because there's no power to process that commodity. So the best to do would be to export, and with time, hope that power is restored for them to be able to start processing. So let's begin to look at such. Then Ghana can now take its destiny in its hands to be able to now begin to process in its country. So these are some of the things that you need to look at. As for us as businessmen, we walk the walk, we talk the talk. We will tell you practical what's happening on the ground. But with feasibility can't be done in an office. You need to come and we'll tell you what's happening. So that's, I just wanted to answer that question for yourself. But coming back to my subject of Hubert's question. I think we need to rethink Africa, or Africa has got higher returns and better profits than Europe. Business in Europe is all finished. The problem we have is we have banks that don't go cross-border. You go into Nigeria, you would deal with, let's say, First Bank. First Bank is not in Ghana. Now, the problem we have in our country as well is the single obligor limits and the access to financing. When I go to a bank and I see a project is over 300 million, the bank can only give me 10 million. Who do I speak to? If you put even 10 banks together, they can't do such transactions. So we need to encourage more of Afrexim banks to be in Ghana, to listen to most of those projects. And those projects are not risky at all to take. You invest in a platform, it's there. A lot of our projects were built, let's say, in our forefathers' time, independence. You ask yourself today, have we been able to maintain? I want to ask everybody from Africa, was the word called maintenance in anybody's language? We don't have it because we don't look after such projects. We run it till distractions before we want to build another one. But what we should be doing is that we put a lot of stress on most of our infrastructure buildings where we don't have time to maintain it. So some of this is something that we need to look at immediately. Thank you.
Thank you. And I hope a deal can be struck between yourselves and the ADB.
We'll sign the contract before we leave here.
Okay. Yeah, tripartite, along with Afrexim. Just before, Craig, I ask you for your two proposals, or a great one. There's this whole issue now of, and I'm asking you because you're in the telecom space, a lot of business leaders as well as government leaders are now beginning to say to themselves, how can we release a bit of power to learn from the mobile phone revolution in the continent into the energy sector? What model would you recommend if you were asked by someone by a leader in a country that's basically saying, I'm prepared to deregulate or partner or PPP, whatever it is, so that we can basically take the lessons from the cell phone revolution and apply them to energy investments?
Well, one of the products that we've been testing and we've been pushing in some of our markets, Hubert, is a solar-powered charger. But again, to come back to how that leverages off the telecommunications infrastructure, is that we utilize the billing system to be able to collect the fee on a daily, monthly, weekly, or monthly basis for the provision of power. So in other words, we sell a small mobile unit which has a small panel of photovoltaic cells which fits on someone's roof in their house. That potentially is distributed by the power utility or by the municipality or the power provider in the country as an alternative to mainline power production. And he collects his fee through the cell phone infrastructure, in other words, through the billing mechanism. We install those units with a GSM SIM card, and we therefore have the ability to communicate with that unit and collect the fee for the power that way. So that's one small example as to what we've used.
Education. I think that's how you invest in the next levels of productivity that can attract and retain and grow investments. I mean, there was an interesting piece of research which basically suggests that in the continent, just the private education each year, it's a $6 billion market today. And there's only one company in the entire continent that's actually listed, that's taken advantage of that, and that's a company in South Africa that's listed on the stock exchange, on the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, and the market is just huge across the continent for that. I think what I'm hearing a lot of in terms of the recurring sort of messages, the continent's opportunities are growing, but are the mandates of our institutions moving along with that direction? And the question is, what can we do about that? Any comments, responses to those, the couple or so questions, Ibrahim?
I think with what my brother from Zambia said, I am a living example of what happened in Zambia. Zambia, a few of our friends, my workers went in there to start a mine. They invested in $480 million in them. That was the first quantum mine. We took in 18 Ghanaians. We paid off the investment within 22 months. And that really taught me a lesson to know that Africa needs capital. And the problem of Africa is here. It's not outside this book. So I just wanted to clarify. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. But please join me in giving the panelists a big round of applause. We really appreciate it.
Welcome back. Thank you very much. I hope that you were enjoying that discussion. It's the Afrexim Bank panel discussion that was held away in Dubai. And you heard Ibrahim Mahama, Chief Executive of Engineers and Planners, and we want to celebrate the efforts of Engineers and Ibrahim for qualifying to be invited by Afrexim Bank to make those key points. We'll take a short break now. When we come back, we'll go through the emails, tons and tons of them arriving in our system tonight. We'll read those that we can before we take a final bow on this program. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Thank you very much for your time on this program and all the emails that have come in. We'll do our best to read some of them. One says that Mr. Ibrahim Mahama appears like a solid businessman. Why doesn't he join his brother in government? He could be the Minister for Transport since we are suffering. Another one says the event is a high-profile event that appears to have taken place in Dubai. Did he go to Iran from there for more business? Another one says that Mr. Ibrahim Mahama must be doing more of the talking and more of mentoring and getting people to understand who he is so that he doesn't get misunderstood by many people. How long ago has he been doing business? Was it before his brother became president? Well, the documentary said he began in the 1990s, and that's definitely before the time his brother became president. This event and what you are showing will not take away the fact that the aircraft has brought a bad name to the aircraft and its landing has brought a bad name to President Mahama. Please get Ibrahim and Engineers and Planners to apologize for landing in Iran. Another one says, I caught the program in the middle. I didn't understand what was happening, but I saw Ibrahim Mahama speaking at what looks like an international conference. Well, it was on the platform of Afrexim, and it happened a few weeks ago in Dubai. Afrexim was celebrating the African champions in terms of entrepreneurship, and we brought that to you. Too many emails to read. Let's leave you with that sound bite from the Chief Executive of Engineers and Planners. Again, we'll come back after that and then wrap up on this program as the news is getting ready. Let's see that one.
Neighboring Guinea has a proven reserve of iron ore to the tune of 1 billion tons. 1 billion tons in translation is about $2 billion. You ask yourself, BHP Billiton is selling that mine. Glencore wants to buy. BTG Pactual wants to buy. Mittal wants to buy. Why can't an African bank, 10 African banks put their money together, invest in that mine for us to buy it and sell the ore rather to them than to give everything to them? You sell for 600 million, you've lost 200 billion. When our kids go, what story are we going to tell them? You saw on the video, Africa has been shipped away by day. As we sit here, Africa is going, with our soil is going. Meanwhile, we have no trade whatsoever to say, you sit in Europe, we send the ore to you and you send us the money. That's where we need to sit down seriously and begin to ask ourselves, where did we go wrong? Where we got wrong is that we don't have access to capital. Africa has got rocks that we're throwing away as waste, which we could use that to reclaim land and build ports for ourselves. and that money stays in Africa. Africa is suffering because of capital flight. No money stays in there. The only money that stays in Africa is the cost of paying salary. The rest of it is going out.
Africa is suffering because of capital flight. No money stays in there, only the cost of paying salaries. Is it time to rethink about Africa? Next time I'll have Imani and others around this table to look at some of those things that Mr. Mahama was saying at that international conference to make a decision whether Africa has a better way to go and whether we have been going the wrong way. Thank you very much for watching. We'll be back on Thursday with another special edition of the program. This has been Good Evening Ghana, brought to you live from Metro TV. Good night.